So yeah, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dan Hughes. Like Lori mentioned, I've been doing some webinars for Nik Software for 11 years now or so. A long time ago at Nik Software, then Google, and now here for DxO, as they've been continuing to develop all of these really powerful tools for us as photographers. This is a fun webinar for me to present, because it's not sort of photo specific necessarily. We're not just talking about landscapes or portraits or detail shots or different kinds of lighting or black and white photography and so on. We're talking about some of the inner workings of how to think about utilizing the Nik collection as a tool set. So we're going to talk about the brush tool. I've actually changed the order. We're not going to go in this specific order, but we're going to talk about the brush tool today. We're going to talk about the Nik Selective Tool preferences as well, because there are some different options that are good to know about, especially when using the brush tool, especially when just accessing the Nik collection from Photoshop, as that's what we're going to be accessing the tools from Adobe Photoshop today. We'll talk about non-destructive workflows utilizing smart objects, how to directly access presets, so you don't have to go into the Nik collection and then click on the preset button. You can just click on it right within the Nik Selective Tool by favoriting presets within any of the Nik collection that has presets. So really nice option. We'll talk about the last edit feature, which allows you to basically reapply whatever your last edit was with a particular tool, with a particular Nik plugin. And then we will also talk about presets, or meta presets rather. And those meta presets are a way for you to start thinking about, or if you're not already thinking about, utilizing more than one of the Nik plugins in your processing. This tool, the meta presets, will help you to think about how you can combine different Nik plugins together, like Color Effects with Silver Effects, or Color Effects Pro with Analog Effects Pro, to create some really interesting effects. And we'll be doing that today using smart objects in Photoshop. And that's going to be helpful because we can go back in and look at what each of those presets that we use, meta presets that we use, what it's doing. Anyways, let's close this. Don't need to save it. And we'll start here on our Her Majesty's Museum. So first things first, I'm here in Photoshop, but I've pressed the Tab key on my keyboard, and that Tab key is just a nice little shortcut for hiding the tool sets on the left and on the right. So by tapping the Tab, you can see we're here in Photoshop, and I've got a relatively simple layout for my interface with my histogram and my layers palette, which the layers palette will become important today. We're going to focus on some of the tools within the layers palette. And then we have this little guy. So in the lower left corner of the interface, I have my Nik Selective Tool, which has been minimized. So let's go ahead and click on that to maximize the Nik Selective Tool. Actually, I hadn't minimized it, I just moved it down there. And let's talk about this. So before we launch into any of the tools, specifically into any of the direct presets that you can access from the Nik Selective Tool, let's sort of get into this one. This thing is a floating palette. It is the Nik Selective Tool. It's one of the two ways that you can access the Nik collection from Photoshop here. And I know that we have a whole wide swath of folks in the webinar today, that lots of folks have been using the Nik tools for a while. Some folks are brand new, never even opened it. So I want to make sure that I'm speaking to everyone, or as much as possible speaking to everyone. So this is one of the ways to access the software. There's a few different layouts that you can use with the Nik Selective Tool. If I move into the upper left corner, and this might be hard in the webinar to see, you've got the X, which is going to allow you to close out your Nik Selective Tool. You can click on the little line there, which minimizes the Nik Selective Tool. And if I do that, it's going to move it down into the lower left corner. And then we can just maximize it by clicking on that little box there. And then the way that my Nik Selective Tool is listed out, it actually lists out the name of each of the Nik plugins, right? If or when you get more comfortable with the tools, you can actually sort of minimize that, which minimizes some of the tool set that you have access to, but it makes it a smaller palette. So if you just want to be able to go into Color Effects Pro or HDR Effects Pro, it's easy to do that with this minimized palette. I'm going to go ahead and sort of maximize my palette, and let's jump into these different presets, right? So if I were to just click on, let's say, Color Effects Pro 4 here, the Color Effects software is going to launch and we'll have access to our 55 different filters, right? But if we go to the right on the Nik Selective Tool and we click on the little caret, there's a little triangle, expand collapse box or caret. If you click on that, it expands into any of your favorited recipes or favorited filters. I should say and, because if I click on, so right now, these are some of my favorite recipes that you see listed out here. But if I click on the word filters, you'll see a lot of the like recognizable names of different filters. And these are some of my favorite filters. And the beauty of this part of the interface is that if I know that I'm going to use cross-processing, or let's say I know I'm going to use Pro Contrast and I want to start out my workflow with color effects with the Pro Contrast filter, rather than just opening the Nik software and it launching into whatever the first filter is that I used last time, I can click directly into the particular filter that I want to use. Now, it is highlighted on filters right now, and again, it's relatively small type, and I should have enlarged my monitor. I'm sorry, I lowered my resolution so it's easier to see. But right now, filters are highlighted. If I click on recipes, both the filters and the recipes will be highlighted and will show up there within the Nik Selective Tool, right? So I can access both of them. If I then click off of filters, now I just have my recipes open. Now, very quickly, the difference between a filter and a recipe. The filter is the individual tool that you might use, like Pro Contrast specifically or Bleach Bypass specifically. And then recipes are a combination of, it's a recipe, a grouping of the individual filters put together, right? So that's sort of how you could define the difference between a filter and a recipe. Now I'm going to click on Blue Monday here. And we're just going to start out by talking about some of the different tools within color effects. And this webinar isn't specifically about color effects, but I'm going to use it here in this situation to talk about some of these different features. I clicked on Blue Monday, I believe, which is going to be a combination of these three filters: Photo Stylizer, Cross Processing, and Contrast Only. Right. So these three filters are being applied or are enabled when we are here within color effects. They're not technically applied because we didn't click the OK button or we didn't click the brush button to apply them in our interface. So, but just note that, this is a stack of filters and we got to it by clicking on one single button, which is quite nice, as opposed to opening up and being able to click on the individual filters and sort of creating our own stack. Those recipes are pre-built. Pretty awesome, actually. So with that, we should probably just take a look at what this particular recipe is doing. This is a combination of Photo Stylizer, Cross Processing, and Contrast Only. If we click the Compare button in the sort of top upper left quadrant of the interface here, if you press and hold Compare, you'll see the original image and you'll see the enhanced image. I'm going to push this a little bit further. I'm going to go into the Photo Stylizer. And my intention here is to sort of show you the brush tool for the most part. That's what I want to kind of get into here. So to do that, I'm going to make some adjustments that are going to be quite noticeable, I guess. And I'll just do that by applying a sort of strong application of our tools. So I don't want that one. I actually want one of the warming cross-processing effects, which of course I'm not going to be able to find because I will practice this, and then as soon as I go live in a webinar, it doesn't do the same thing for me. It does. It is doing the exact same thing. It's just I've probably changed what I've my thought process here. Okay, LT04. Let's run with that, and then Contrast Only. So if we take a look at the before and after, here's the before, and here's the after. I'm kind of enjoying what it's doing in the sky, in the top part of our interface or image, not so much on the structure itself. So what we could do is use control points with each of the individual filters. Plus control points put the effect in, minus control points are going to take the effect out. Or, and in this case, it's probably faster because I've got several different filters that I'm applying to the image. Rather than using those control points, I'm going to click the brush button. And as I click the brush button, I just want to point out this is going to apply these filters into a duplicated layer, in this case, in Photoshop. But let's back up a second, because the major strength, in my opinion anyways, when using this brush tool is to combine it with using control points as well, because the control points are going to make a really photographic looking application or selection, and then allow you to then brush the effect in exactly where you want it, which is a really cool combination of the sort of control point capability with the brush capability that we have here. I'll show you an example of that. I just want to show you the basic use of the brush first. So I click the brush button within Color Effects Pro. It applies the filter to this duplicated layer in this case, and it applies a black layer mask. So you see over here on the right side of the interface, again, for maybe folks who are not familiar with layer masks, a black layer mask, this is going to conceal the entire layer, right? So that's a black layer mask, and what it's doing is it's kind of hiding the layer itself, these pixels. If you follow me to my Nik Selective Tool, which has changed because I'm now in the brush tool within the Nik Selective Tool, I have the ability to brush things in. There's a little eraser tool, so I can click to erase, and this is going to allow us to selectively remove the effect. We can click the fill button. So if I click fill, watch what happens to the image, and then watch what happens to that layer mask over here on the right. As I click the fill button, the entire layer is revealed, and we also have a white layer mask. And that's because in Photoshop with layer masks, black conceals and white reveals, right? So now we've got an entirely white layer mask, which is going to reveal the entire portion of the image. And now what we can do is go in and maybe erase the effect out of any area we don't want. And when we do this, it's going to be applying that erasure to the layer mask. So it's not really deleting pixels in this situation. What it's doing is it's hiding those pixels behind. Now, some of you might be saying, well, why on earth would you have done that combination of filters? Well, I wanted to kind of show you, some sort of dramatic change. And in this case, it sort of just works to use this really funky set of filters to create something, I don't know, a little more creative, a little maybe less realistic, and I don't know, more, at least in my mind right now today, more interesting, at least to play with. Now, we are using this brush tool. I've clicked on the eraser tool, and you can see what it's doing to the layer mask. But of course, we are within Photoshop, right? And within Photoshop, you have the ability to change brush sizes. You have the ability, oops, I'm gonna go back one step. I'm not sure what happened there. But you have the ability to I didn't mean to do whatever I just did. I got rid of my entire adjustment. Anyways, you have the ability to change the size of the brush and the hardness of the brush. Why don't I just show you that? So I like to use the bracket keys personally. There's a lot of shortcuts within Photoshop, but if you use the left bracket, notice, okay, here's my brush. You can see it kind of moving around the image. I'll maybe enlarge the image once. If I use the left bracket, I can make a smaller brush. And if I use the right bracket on my keyboard, I can make a larger brush, right? That same tool is up in the upper left-hand corner for anyone not familiar. And again, I'm sorry, so some folks are probably very familiar with this tool, others maybe never seen this before. If you follow my cursor into the upper left corner and we click into our brush tool, you can do all sorts of changes in here. The brush capability in Photoshop is massive. We can't talk about all of the things. I don't think I even know all of the things about the brush tools within Photoshop. And I've used the brush tool in Photoshop. But anyways, you can change the size of your brush by way of pixels here. We were doing that with the bracket. And then you can change the hardness of the brush as well. So if we were to adjust the hardness and then we go into our brush, if I go and click using my eraser, what's going to happen is we get this very hard brush stroke, right? So you can see the edge is very well delineated. You can, of course, go back in and change that hardness. We can maybe bring it down to 0 to make it very soft. And then if I click here, you'll see now we have a very soft edge brush. Well, another one of those cool shortcuts is if you're using the left and the right bracket in Photoshop to make a brush bigger or smaller, right, left and right. You can also make a brush harder and softer if you hold the Shift key down and then use the left and the right bracket. If you use the right bracket while holding Shift down, it's going to give you a harder brush, and if you hold Shift down and use the left bracket, it's going to give you a softer brush. So it's a nice way to sort of, add nuance or be careful of edges, or have just that much more control over this brush tool once you know where those different brush dynamics kind of are. Now, all that said and done, let's erase this part out. Maybe I'll go into my brush tool here and press brush, because as I've done this, I've missed some of these areas in the outside of the side of the structure, and I want to get that back. So we'll go and brush that back in. And I think in a perfect world, I would be using a Wacom tablet. Right now, I'm just on my laptop, and I'm using my touch, my laptop. What the heck's it called? Anyway, my touchpad there, and so it's not as precise as using like a Wacom tablet or something like that, a brush-based tablet. But anyways, long story short, that's how you control your brush tool within the Nik Selective Tool. You've got the brush capability, the eraser, fill, and then trash. And the trash just basically gives you a black layer mask again. And then, of course, you brush things in or out using your brush tool. When you're done, you click the Apply button. Now, I'm going to click the Apply button, and I have a setting set up in my preferences. And that preference allows me to keep this layer and layer mask. And I point this out. So note this, I have, my upper layer here with Blue Monday, that particular preset recipe applied to our image. The default is actually to do something slightly different. So if you're following along and now you don't have 2 layers, you just have 1 layer that's been merged into your original background, I want to show you what's happening, right? So I'm going to let's just move on to the next image, because we talked about the brush tool. Let's go into this next image, right? And I want to move you through the preferences within the Nik Selective Tool and talk you through all of them. We're going to change one back to its default setting, and you can decide whether you like the default or you prefer to change it. But yeah, I'm going to just sort of open these up hopefully for you. So we're back in the Nik Selective Tool here. And in the lower left corner of the Nik Selective Tool are the preferences. When I click on that little gear in that lower left corner, my Nik Collection preferences open, and we get these nice options. First of all, when you launch launch Photoshop, if your Nik Selective Tool doesn't automatically open when you open Photoshop, this checkbox is likely off, right? So if you want to open I keep wording that wrong. If you want to open Photoshop and have direct access to the Nik Selective Tool, you just make sure that this little checkbox is on. In fact, follow me here. I'm going to click cancel here. If you're not sure where the Nik Selective Tool is, like let's say you set up the software and it's not showing up, what you can do to make the Nik Selective Tool show up in Photoshop is go to the File drop-down menu, go to Automate, and then over to the Nik Selective Tool. So if it's not showing up and you want it to, this is where you find it, Automate Nik Selective Tool 2. Once you've clicked on it, it will open. And then if you want the software, the Nik Selective Tool, to launch every single time, you just click that little checkbox. It turns it on. Now, these other options, you get 3 other options here, and it's kind of how Photoshop and the Nik Collection interact together. So the default settings, I believe, look like this. That is the Apply Filter to Image Composition, Apply Brush Effect merge to current layer, and then apply favorite filters, apply a Nik collection. Let's talk about what these things mean. Apply filter to image composite. So what this does, if I have it set to active layer, now if I open up the Nik collection, it's going to apply the Nik collection stuff, whatever we do, to whatever the active layer was or is. In this case, in my layers palette, it would just be the background. So it would adjust the background when we're not dealing with smart objects. The sort of standard workflow would just adjust there. I much prefer, it does make for a larger file, but I much prefer having my pixels, my background layer, or whatever layers I have, to be doing what's called a merge stamp visible, which basically makes a whole other set of pixels so that we're working in a kind of more non-destructive workflow. It makes it so we can kind of go back to the other layers when necessary. So I prefer image composite, but try out, see what you like. Apply brush effect. So by default, it's going to be set to merge to current layer. And what that does is it takes anything that you've done and it sort of merges it together. I'm going to show you that right now. And then the last thing, just to cover it really quickly, apply favorite filters and recipes and last edit. Right now, if I were to click on one of those recipes, as we did, in the last example, or if we click on a preset from any of the other tools or a favorited filter, it's going to launch that particular piece of software into the preset that you've used. Right? That's exactly what we did on the last image. I clicked on like one of the cool recipes for color effects. It launches color effects, and we have our 3 filters. If you were to say apply in Photoshop, the software is going to launch and apply that recipe for us just basically within Photoshop, which is really great if you want to work much faster, right? Because it's just going to take your recipe and it's going to apply it, which is fantastic in situations where you know that the recipe is going to do what you want. If you want to make sure that you can kind of launch and adjust whatever you need to adjust within your recipe or preset, I would say you probably want to be using this software as apply in the Nik collection. But again, these are these options that you have, and they're really nice to kind of experiment with and play with to see what you prefer. So these are the defaults. I'm going to show you what happens when you use this merge to current layer, and it's helpful and nice. I just prefer to use the other option. I prefer to use apply to separate layer. But let's look at it. I'm going to click the OK button. And let's click on, how about cool blue? Now let's go lavender. So we're going to use color effects again. It doesn't matter which of the Nik tools we use. We can just basically go in and click on whatever of our recipes and presets that we want to use, and it's going to launch. In this case, if I click on silver effects, it's going to launch into our black and white conversion software, and it's going to apply dark glow or contrasty, one of these recipes or presets. It's called presets within silver effects. Let's click on Blue Monday, right? This is a recipe within color effects. It's the same recipe we clicked on a minute ago. Let's just see what happens. And I think I'm going to augment this a little bit. I'm going to add another filter. I'm going to click Add Filter, because we don't have to just stick with whatever the recipe is doing. We can do whatever we want within the software. It's one of the major benefits of the tool. It gives you total control. And we're going to click on infrared film, right? So I'm going to add the infrared film filter. Oftentimes when you click on a filter, it's highly transformative and it's not exactly what you want. Right, so the infrared film filter is trying to emulate the process of shooting infrared film. And that can be really cool and really interesting, again, for kind of otherworldly effects. I'm going real crazy in this webinar, I think, in terms of the sort of adjustments that we're getting here. We're going very otherworldly at this point. But what I want to do is make these changes so that you can kind of get a sense of what's happening. And then you can see the differences with the brush tool and so on and so forth. So let's say we love what's happening here to the foreground. Again, we could go in and put control points in, put them exactly where we want them to be. Might be a good thing to do in this case. I think I even said that I was going to do that. So I'm going to put plus control points into the areas where I know I want the effect, and then maybe take minus control points and remove them from certain areas. remove it from the tree, and maybe the sky in the background. And we'll just be applying this infrared film filter to the foreground primarily. Let's see what happens. Yeah, let's go ahead and do this. You know what? Here's another trick, ladies and gentlemen. If we wanted to, I don't want to duplicate these control points. I'm gonna make some changes to contrast only. I'm gonna put the adjustment. Okay, I'm doing this on the fly. Here's our trick. I'm going to show you how to take the control points that are here within the infrared film filter, right? So the plus control points, they're putting in the filtered effect in here. The minus control points, they're removing the effect from up here in the sky. I'm going to show you how to duplicate those control points so that we have the same application of these filters in these different places. And these, sorry, the same control points will be duplicated into each of the individual filters that we want these control points to be duplicated in. So to get the control points that I've applied to this particular filter onto contrast only, I have to tell the software I want to copy them. So I would do that by using this marquee option, right? So basically I'm going to just click anywhere that's not on one of those control points. And when I click and drag, so I click outside of control point and drag, I'm able to enable all of these control points by creating this marquee. It's just the default, so click and drag. I'm going to encompass all of the control points that I want copied. That's going to enable them. It kind of turns them on. You can see these, the opacity sliders are now active. And once you've activated any of the control points you want to copy, you move into the filter, the little options filter drop-down menu. So to the right of infrared film, there's this little 3 lines and a drop-down. You click on that and you say copy control points. Once you've copied the control points, now you can move into the different filters where right now contrast only has no control points on it, and we can move into the filter itself, click on that drop-down menu again, that's to the right of the label, and say paste control points. And now what we're getting is the exact same set of control points applied to contrast only, right? We could do the same thing to cross-processing if we wanted to. I think I do want to do that, so let's go into that stack and say paste, right? And then maybe Photo Stylizer will just leave active everywhere, just for giggles. Let's see what happens. Now, from there, we're going to click the brush button. So we've sort of used these control points in tandem, kind of, with this brush capability. So I click the brush button in the lower right corner of the Nik interface. It did almost the same thing as it did last time. It basically generated this black layer mask, and it has our layer of pixels here. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the entire layer, and then I'm just going to erase this maybe off of the grass and any of our greenery, right? And I'm sort of, I don't know, I guess I'm walking you through this pretty as precisely as accurately as possible anyways, because I want to show you the difference between that one preference that we were clicking on before, and that was the preference to apply these filters to a duplicated layer, like I did before, or to have it merge down into a single layer, right? And then I can sort of, I'll hit upon that again. Anyways, let's say we've masked in where we want, and we've erased out of the areas where we don't want it to be. I'm going to click the apply button. When I click apply, watch the layers palette on the right, right? So when I click apply, with this particular preference on, now all of the stuff that we did within that duplicated layer of pixels, it gets merged down into our background. And you know, the benefit of that in this situation is that it makes a smaller file in terms of file size. But in my mind, the drawback of that is if I needed to make changes to where I've masked that in, I can't do that now because it's kind of baked into the application. So there's drawbacks and there's benefits, right? So to again see those changes or to know kind of the difference, I'm going to actually walk us back a couple steps. So I'm going to hit Command Z, and I'll just delete this layer. And then I'm going to go into our preferences and change the preference. So I'm going to go apply brush effect, and we're going to say apply to separate layer. Click the OK button. And now whenever we click that brush button, we will have a separate layer. And this leads me to the next tool that I want to show you, and that is the last edit, right? So when we started playing with this image, we clicked on Blue Monday as a recipe, and that applied the particular filters that are encompassed within Blue Monday. And then we made changes to it, and then we applied those changes. Well, that stuff, the last application of these different tools is kind of like recorded, right? And the software knows what we did last time. So if I go to this button right here, last edit, it's going to launch the software into the last filter stack that we just used, right? So everything that we did a minute ago is going to be saved here, which is a really cool way of working, different images with the same filter stack. Or also, if you maybe made a mistake or wanted to make some changes, you just delete what you did last time, and then you can kind of start over again here. So that's a nice feature. I'll show the last edit again on a different image as well. Anyways, I'm going to click the brush button because all of our control points are exactly where we wanted them to be. I'm just going to click the brush button this time, make a larger mask or larger brush. I'm also going to make my image a little bit smaller because that'll make it that a little easier. Apply that right there. So say we're happy with that brush and that mask. I'm going to click the apply button, and voila, now we have our duplicated layer still with our layer mask. So we've just sort of differentiated those preferences at this point and sort of walked through that brush tool. Hopefully that's relatively clear. All right, so with that, let's move into our next image. And our next image is our image of these metal gears, or one of them is a, anyways. So before we jump into this one, I'm going to crop this photo. I'm going to crop it square. And then what we're going to do is convert this to a smart object. And I just want a squared image for this particular photo because I kind of prefer it. I'm going to do that ahead of time so that it's basically ready to go for us. Now, smart objects. Anyone who's not familiar with smart objects, smart objects is a capability built into Photoshop that allows us to do lots of different things, but in this case, it allows us to apply smart filters. And the benefit of the smart filters is that we can go back and reprocess the image afterwards, right? Everything's not sort of set in stone. If I'm working the way that we've worked so far in this webinar, we are working with multiple layers. So technically it's non-destructive because you can go back because of that. By the way, non-destructive, that term in photography, in post-processing within photography, it basically means you can always get back to the original image that you've launched, right? And so the benefit of that is that nothing is necessarily set in stone. It's sort of parametric. You can get back to it if you needed to. There are a couple little drawbacks of smart objects, but let's just talk about what you can do with these smart objects with smart filters. So to convert our image into a smart object, you can do this in two different sort of steps within Photoshop. You can do it when it's open here within Photoshop, or if you're utilizing the Adobe Camera Raw software, you can actually launch an image right into Photoshop as a smart object as well. Anyways, since we're here within Photoshop, to convert our image into a smart object, what you'll do is move into your Layers palette, and then right-click on your Layers palette and go to Convert to Smart Object. When you convert to Smart Object, you got to kind of let it do, it clicks away, it processes the image a little bit, and then it figures out that it's a smart object, and that's weird for some reason. Oh, there we go. My preview wasn't showing up. But you'll notice now my layer is no longer locked as a background as it was by default. And I also have this little sort of piece of paper with the folded edge. This is just indicating that this is a smart object. So you can see that within my Layers palette. Now, let's go ahead and jump into Analog Effects Pro. So we'll do some, some fun processing on this image as a smart object. This prompt that pops up is just letting us know that we are working with a smart filter, and the brush feature is one of those things that's deactivated. Because of the way smart objects work, the brush capability from the Nik Selective Tool is not active. You can't use it when you're using the smart object capability. So that's one of those little drawbacks that I was talking about. I don't think that is the end of the world for a lot of users here. But anyways, this warning is just kind of telling you that. By the way, there's a lot of warnings that pop up from time to time, and it's letting you know that settings will be changed, or in this case, the brush capability is kind of off limits or deactivated because of the way that Smart Object works. Once you've read this a couple times, you can actually click the Do Not Show Again checkbox, and then these won't pop back up until you update your software again, or you download a new version of the software, and you might need to hit those buttons one more time. Anyways, I'm going to click the OK button. I leave those features active so that in these webinars I can kind of walk you through what's happening. We're here within Analog Effects Pro. Analog Effects Pro is a really interesting piece of software. It basically takes over 200 years of technological advances in photography, and it throws them out the door, and it reintroduces a lot of the sort of aberrations that might occur in different facets of film, in different facets of analog photography. So we are on a smart object. Let's just start out by clicking on one of these. So I'm gonna click on Weathered Dry Plate. It's one of the presets that's built into Analog Effects Pro. You can see the before and after by pressing that compare button. There's the before, there's the after. I'm actually gonna just add a control point here and remove the detail extraction, and then also darken down, just to make a little bit more of a dramatic kind of scene, darken down the shadow areas here. And let's say we're happy with this right now. So cool, we did some work, we clicked on a recipe or a preset, made some adjustments, we clicked the OK button. Now, the benefit of the smart object here is that, of course, we can go back in. So I can, if I was not working in the smart object workflow, so we were working the way that we were before in the other two examples that we showed, basically what we had done, if we wanted to rework it, we'd have to basically delete the work that we had done and start over. The beauty of utilizing these smart objects is that it's listed over here, smart filters, it's listed over here on the right within our layer, and I can just double click on Analog Effects Pro, and the software will launch, and any control points that we had and any filters and tools that we used, they are going to be reflected here. So we can easily get back in. You can see here's our basic adjustments. There's that control point that we used. Let's say we don't want the image in black and white now. We actually just want to get some color back into it. I can go and click on one of these other film types. So now we've got this kinds of muted film type effects. Or we could go into the photo plate. We can do anything, any adjustments we might want to or need to, we can come in here and readjust them. It's really a wonderful way of working. So I'm just kind of clicking on these different features, different tools, and turning them on or turning them off to change it. I can click the OK button. That renders the image back over into Photoshop. And then, of course, it's a smart object. We can go back and reprocess it by double clicking on the Analog Effects Pro. So it's really quite a wonderful way of working. There are a couple little drawbacks, like the brush tool works. The brush tool from the Nik Selective Tool does not work. It's deactivated. And layer masks are a little bit funky because of the way smart objects work. But to learn more about that, if you've never heard the term smart objects before, open up a browser. You could jump on YouTube. There's some really great explainers, or just open up a browser, jump into the search bar and type in Photoshop smart objects or Photoshop smart object limitations or something along those lines. And you'll get all sorts of great information from that. Adobe does a really good job to inform viewers on how those sort of intricate bits work as well. Kind of like what Nik Software does, ideally with these webinars. So let's do this. Let's move on to our last and final image. I want to show you one more thing. Presets, sorry, the meta presets. So the meta presets are a newer capability built into the most recent versions of the software. And what they do is they combine two of the different pieces of software together, right? So if you follow me into the Nik Selective Tool, yours might open like this. It might, the meta presets might be closed. So if you click on that little caret, it opens it up. And then these meta presets combine different pieces of software together, different pieces of the Nik collection together to create a different look. So Adoxical actually uses HDR Effects Pro and Silver Effects Pro. Dry Plate utilizes Silver Effects Pro and Analog Effects Pro. And I just know this because these little icons here are reflected up here as well. They're the same. So you can kind of figure that out. Now, if I click on, let's say I click on expired film right now. What's going to happen is the software is going to basically apply those two presets for us. So I think did I click on Adoxical? It's already slipped my mind. Anyways, I clicked on one of the meta presets and it automatically just applies that look for us. And so that's fantastic for a lot of reasons, but first of all, it just does the thing for us. So I think I clicked on Golden Haze, didn't I? And so Golden Haze is going to apply Viveza as well as Color Effects Pro, right? And it kind of created a higher key image and it kind of created this kind of warm tone overall. I'm going to go ahead and tap Command Z on my keyboard a couple of times to get us back to the original image. Command Z is a shortcut for undo on a Mac. That would be Control Z on a PC, if I remember correctly, to undo, to go back, right, to undo that stuff. Now, basically what I did by undoing is I deleted what that meta preset was doing. It got rid of it, right? Here's one of the cool facets that you can utilize when you're utilizing the meta presets as a smart object or smart filter. So if you follow me back over to the right side with our layers palette, right click on our layer, click to convert to smart object. The software converts that image to a smart object. And now if I click on Golden Haze, it's going to do that work for us. So it's going to apply the Viveza preset and then the Color Effects Pro preset for us. But it's a smart filter. Was that the right one? Yeah. Anyways, it's a smart filter. And now we can go into each of those pieces of software and kind of decide what's going on. I think I clicked on Purple Haze a minute ago, didn't I? Yeah, anyways, it doesn't really matter. But I got those mixed up, Golden Haze and Purple Haze. Let's delete them. The tools that I just used, I'll just get rid of them and I'll click on Purple Haze one more time. As I did that, it's re-rendering the image. We'll do that one more time, get rid of the color effects. Okay, so I'm gonna click on Purple Haze this time instead of Golden Haze. Sorry about that. This is gonna apply the presets, but it's a smart object, so we can come back in and reprocess the image. Excuse me, my throat's getting dry. All right, so there's our our Purple Haze. So let's say we don't, or we want to turn on or off a particular tool, like I can go into Color Effects Pro. There's a little eye that's to the left of the Smart Filter label. You can click on that to hide that particular filter. You don't have to, it's just we did to take a look. And if I go into Viveza, if I double click on the title there, this is gonna let me, this is gonna let me go into Viveza and adjust the original adjustments that Viveza was adjusting. So this is telling me that this is a smart filter, smart object. This Photoshop, this is telling me because it's a smart object and we've got it gets complicated, but because there's multiple smart filters applied, this is indicating to us that we're not going to get kind of the true preview, especially because I turned off the adjustment. This is where it starts to get complicated. And of course, I think now my computer wants to crash. What I was going to do here is make a couple changes within Viveza. Let's see if it'll let me, even though there's a little adjustment there. Yeah, so let's say I warm it. Let's reduce some of the red. Let's increase some of the structure. let's just darken down the brightness a little bit overall, and then click the apply button. And now I've made those adjustments within Viveza, but I can go and turn my color effects back on. If we wanted to, we can go and make adjustments to color effects and so on and so forth. So the meta presets, in my opinion, work really well as smart objects, smart filters, if you're interested in making changes. If you just like the look of the different meta presets and it does exactly what you need it to do, there's no need to use the smart object because the software is just doing the thing that you want it to do, and it looks great right off the bat, which is, kind of one of the keys to those meta presets. They are designed to help folks, know and understand that you can use Silver Effects Pro with color effects. You can combine these different pieces of software together using your own creative thought process, or you can just click on one of these presets and it makes a cool look for you. It works. Lori, I think with that, I will throw it to you if there are any questions, because I think I covered everything. And
yes, you did.
Yeah,
you did a very good job.
Hopefully it was thorough.
Yes, it was very good. Brian does have a question about the meta presets. Cool. He was asking about going in and changing them, but his question goes a little bit further than that. He says, how can I save a particular Nik Collection program combo with certain filters and or adjustments applied without creating a smart object? So,
whoa, yeah, wait, word that again, say it again.
Yeah, it says, how can I save a particular Nik Collection program combo with certain filters and or adjustments applied without creating a smart object?
Okay. There are kind of two ways. Neither of them are built into the Nik Collection. Both of them are, utilizing a droplet or an action within Photoshop, and then one of them is doing it manually, but with presets. So that means, so the question is in regards, I think anyways, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian and Lori, the question is, you have a combination of different tools that you like to use, and you want to save that as your own kind of meta preset. Right now, that the user does not have the ability to save their own custom meta presets. So the workaround is to save whatever you like to do within color effects as a recipe, and then set it as a favorite. And then, let's say you're combining color effects with silver effects, you would do the same. You'd make your preset within silver effects and save it as a, one of your favorite presets. And then you can just click on it here, 1 and then 2, but that's a little bit manual. So the second option is to do exactly that first thing, right? So make a preset in color effects, make a preset in silver effects, and then write an Adobe Photoshop action utilizing those presets that you've created. I've gotten that to work before. I have not tried that with the contemporary version of Photoshop in the contemporary version of color effects or the Nik Collection, but I've made that work before as an action. Hopefully that makes sense, Brian, but neither of them are as simple as a single click,
Right. Okay. Robert is asking if you can quickly review creating a smart object.
Absolutely. Let's jump back over into, let's say, like this image. So, you know what? Let's do this two ways, Robert. I'll show you how to do it when you're right here within Photoshop, and then I'll show you how to do it within Adobe Camera Raw, so pre-launching into Photoshop. And then I'll mention the benefit of doing it, as you're launching it into Adobe Camera Raw and then into the Photoshop. So here, we have our regular kind of standard layer process. It's a background, it's locked. And what you'll do is move over to the right side into your layers palette, right click on your background or on whichever layer or a combination of layers you want to convert into a smart object. Because Robert, you can actually have 3 or 4 or 7 layers and you can combine them into a single smart object, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyways, you right click on your background layer here and then click on convert to smart object. And then the Photoshop just goes in and does that for you. It adjusts the kind of file that it is, and it makes it into a smart object. I think you can do that in layers as well. I can't remember where it's listed in the, yeah, it's right here. So look at all of the things that you can do as well. So, you know, much like everything else in Photoshop, Smart Objects, you know, we can keep it simple and do what we've been doing, or you can investigate much further, and there's all sorts of different options that you can jump into. Anyways, that's that Smart Object now. Okay, so let's close this out, and I'm going to show you what you can do from Adobe Camera Raw. If we launch this into Photoshop again, just as a raw file, Adobe Camera Raw is going to launch. If we wanted to open this as a smart object from Adobe Camera Raw, you go into the preferences at the very bottom of your Adobe Camera Raw software. And you can click on this little checkbox right here that says open as a smart object. By the way, my files, I opened them as 12 megapixel files because they're good size for demoing, so that things don't take as long. This is a 30 megapixel file though. So I just want to point that out. So we're dealing with 16 bits because it's going to be better for post-processing in the long run in terms of getting more information and having more to adjust. But I did res them down so that we have a faster operating for our demo. Anyways, Robert, yeah, it was Robert. Click on this little checkbox, open in Photoshop as Smart Object, click OK. The benefit of doing this from Adobe Camera Raw is that now our non-destructive Smart Object process goes all the way back, goes all the way to the raw processing, which technically means you can open back up into Adobe Camera Raw and access the original information, which is pretty darn cool. Like if you double click on the little icon in the lower right corner, Adobe Camera Raw opens back up. You know, we can make our changes, and that's going to be reflected. That's going to be reflected within our Photoshop Smart Object. It just re-renders it. And then we can go on into our Nik collection. So it's really kind of cool. Okay, Lori, I think I got that one.
Yes, you did get that one. Okay, so last question, but it's kind of a combination. Two people are asking questions here. Number one, Alec would like to see you demonstrate in Viveza how you create a recipe. Okay. And when you're in there, can you also, let me find this, can you show how you can copy control points from one filter to or one recipe to the next? You know how you can see the control points?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look. So I'm going to open Viveza. It's going to warn me that it's a smart object. Lori, what was the first question? The second one pertained to control points being applied to different presets.
Exactly. So the first one is he just wanted to know how you can create a recipe.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Okay. So in Viveza, that's where there's some differences in terminology. Color Effects Pro has recipes because it's combining different filters together. The rest of them, I believe, the rest of the Nik collection, they're just called presets. But no big deal. It's just I understand what he's saying. I just want to make sure that I don't confuse other folks. So let's say we do some adjustments here. I'm gonna do some funky stuff. I wouldn't use Viveza for converting from color to black and white, but maybe to create like a subdued bleach bypass kind of effect where you've reduced some color and then added some structure and some contrast. So let's say we really like this as an effect. And then, we place a control point or two because that's an important facet. Let's place one over here and one over here. We can save this as a preset with these control points. I'm going to make some kind of adjustment. Let's increase the saturation back into the sky. So now we have a bleached foreground, but saturation within the sky. Maybe even brighten this one up just a touch so there's a difference of tone. Yep, place that right there. Okay, so let's say we love this. We're going to click Save Preset. Now, when I click Save Preset, with Viveza, there's this nice little option with this checkbox that says Save with Control Points. So I'm going to call this Bleach Bypass with Sky Control Points, or something like that, just so I know what it is. Click the Save button.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We are at the top of the hour. Dan, thank you for this webinar, and we do hope that you'll join us again.
Yeah, geez, I didn't even realize that we're at the top of the hour. Thank you, Lori. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, have an absolutely fantastic holiday here. If you're in the United States, have great Thanksgiving. I'm gearing up for one last day of work before a couple days off, and I'm pretty excited about that because I'm hopefully going to do some shooting this week, some photography. Thanks, Lori. Thank you, everybody. Have a really great week. Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.